Okay, well, we've got lots to get through, so I know people are going to keep joining, but I am going to get cracking now. So, welcome to our panel discussion on the future of SEO. I'm Nicola, partner at Growth & Co, and we advise VCs and founders on growth, hire the right people for them, and run a community of growth leaders. Now, one of the topics that keeps coming up with clients and our community is, what should I be doing about SEO in this AI world? And myself and Joseph both really need to upskill in this space. It was also interesting to see that 30% of you that signed up also had very low confidence in your SEO strategy. So it's good to know that I am not on my own. And thank goodness we have Jamie and Claudia here with us today, two very experienced SEO marketeers who are going to be sharing their insights and recommendations with us today. So as I mentioned, before I hand over to our panelists, please do introduce yourselves in chat. Rank yourself on your SEO knowledge, 3 being ninja, 1 being help, please. And pop in any questions now or as we go, and we'll try and get to some of them at the end. And if we do run out of time, we'll make sure we cover them and send them out afterwards as well. So without further ado, over to our panelists. Could you each do a quick introduction? Tell us who you are. Let's start with you, Claudia.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Claudia Higgins. I have been in the SEO industry now for about 11 years. Started in retail, Argos head office, working there for 6 years. And then since then, I've been on the tech side, enterprise SEO platforms, currently at SEO Clarity. And the part of SEO that I've always enjoyed the most is the data and the problem solving and the blend, I think, of analytical skills and empathy that it takes to kind of really have a holistic approach to SEO. But that's why I'm still here after 11 years.
I love that. Analytical skills and empathy. Great combo. Jamie.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamie Peach, head of SEO at Popsa. Popsa is a fast-growing AI-powered photo data company. We sell photo printed products. I spent the vast majority of my career both in-house and agency side helping brands scale their organic presence across traditional search, but now, of course, more recently, generative AI platforms like ChatGPT. Really looking forward to this discussion today.
Well, we're seeing quite a lot of 1s and 1.5s coming in, although I have noticed that we have a 5. So, Philip, beware, I might be coming to you for some advice too. So first of all, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of the terminology. We've got SEO, GEO, AEO, AIO, LLMO, and then Jamie told me about RAG, which I don't even know what that stands for. So Jamie, help me understand what they all mean, and are they all the same?
Sure. Well, we'll start with the easy one. That's SEO. Hopefully we all know what that is, search engine optimization, the classic discipline of improving your website's visibility in organic search engine results. Today, that's almost exclusively Google. But of course, now you've got all of these new acronyms being spoken about, and I don't think any one of them has quite stuck yet. And when it does, perhaps it will be different geographically, like we have SEM, for example, in continental Europe, and PPC, who we use in the UK, and it could go in that sort of direction. Generative engine optimization is a popular one. That's the kind of newer and evolving focus around optimizing for generative search platforms like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and so on. And to be honest, all of the others, like the AEO and AIO, et cetera, are kind of similar or the same as that, just with like different levels of usage commonality. Because AIO refers to Google's AI overviews, which is what used to be known as the search generative experience. They've kind of rebranded that. So SGE is an acronym that's less used. And then, Nicola, you mentioned RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. And this is a method used by the large language models, including Google for their version of Gemini, to fetch live data, which improves the accuracy and relevance of the generated responses, which typically on their own aren't pulling live data from the web. So it's an augmentation of that generative response to kind of fact check for things like accuracy and deliver a better response overall.
Right, there will be an acronym test at the end of this, by the way, so be prepared. So all these acronyms, Claudia, does it really actually change anything about your SEO strategy? Is it just a lot of panic and noise? And if we keep doing what we've been doing, will we actually all be okay?
This is a tricky one because in terms of optimization, a lot of the guidance that we're getting from platforms like Google when they're talking about AI mode, which I know we're coming on to later, are things like if you're doing all of the things we recommend for standard SEO, then you're automatically optimizing yourself for AI overviews and for AI mode. There's a couple of extra things that can be useful that have been kind of increasingly useful over time because of other set features that have shown up, like image results and things like that, of like having schema and stuff involved. But I think that's really only looking at it from the like, there's so much, we call it SEO, search engine optimization, but the optimization part, from my experience of being in-house and now working with all of the big clients we have here, is that the optimization part is part of what we do, but so much of it is about communicating the changes that are happening in Google, what this means for us, how we're measuring things, what are the right KPIs in a shifting landscape like this, where you were increasingly getting pushed down the page by Google's own content, whether that's product carousels, whether it's AI overviews, whether it's now AI mode coming in. That I think the part of the strategy that it's going to have the biggest impact on is the measurement side of it. You know, in the past, most SEO teams that I've worked with, their KPIs tend to be non-brand visibility, like average rank, and kind of looking at a bunch of tracked keywords and monitoring how they show up for those, but also non-brand traffic tend to be those main KPIs. And those are getting harder and harder to come by as Google puts its own content at the top, pushes you down, decreases click-through rates. Ranking in the same place or better can amount to less traffic. And then we've got LLMs coming in as well. So I think the biggest challenge for SEOs at the moment is like, what does success look like when we're not growing our traffic despite our efforts? The deal with Google, the unofficial deal with Google for the last couple of decades has been Google wants to give good content to the users who are searching for things. And if you optimize your page as well, you rank high and they'll click on your results and you get traffic to your site. But that's kind of not how that relationship is working so much these days. So thinking about things like brand reputation, thinking about it almost, some of this is going to have to be considered in similar ways to TV advertising, that it's like brand recognition and reputation management and more kind of digital PR crossover stuff as well. So that's the part of the strategy I think is going to have the biggest hit, and communicating that particularly upwards.
Jamie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say I think of it like a Venn diagram, and there's a huge chunk of crossover in the middle in terms of what works for LLM optimization and what works for traditional search optimization. I think it's important to be aware of what's not in that middle part, and the things that either work just exclusively for LLMs or the things that work considerably more so for LLMs. It's those nuances and figuring that out over the course of time, that's going to set you up for success in this new world of AI optimization. Just to kind of call out a couple of examples here, we know, for example, that LLM crawlers can't execute JavaScript in the same way that Google can. So making sure that your website is accessible and there are fallbacks in place is much more important for LLMs than it is for traditional Google search, who can do this sort of thing much more easily. I think author attribution is more important for AI search. I think things like entity clarity and salience is more important. So making sure that this is like just a more sophisticated version of keyword relevance and density, but not one that can be easily gamed. So making sure that you're appearing in all the knowledge bases and things like that is, I think, more important for AI search optimization. So there's those things that you need to be aware of that are either more important or are an exclusive focus for LLMs that don't really matter so much for traditional search. But still today, for the most part, when you think about the content quality, technical foundations, trust signals, all those kind of traditional SEO components, that's still the bedrock, whether you're optimizing for Google or ChatGPT.
Jamie, you just mentioned there about the whole technical SEO piece. Mm-hmm. Is there different types of technical audits you should be looking at now?
No, I think one of the main kind of considerations is the fact that ChatGPT and all the other LLM crawlers can't execute JavaScript. One of the other things that's often called out, which is worth double checking, is that you're not blocking AI crawlers in your robots.txt file, for example. So these are some things just to double check, because they're using different bot names, that could be excluded for various different reasons by different teams who perceive things in different ways. So unless there's a specific reason not to allow AI bots access to your website, this is always something to double check that they can gain access. I think one of the things that we're seeing at Popsa, being a much smaller website with a limited number of pages, is we don't get hit by the LLM bots nearly as much as we do by Google. Obviously, Google has much more significant resources from a crawling perspective. And so this is also something worth looking at your log files to see how often you're being hit. There's nothing, unfortunately, you can do to prompt LLMs to crawl your site more, other than doing more of the kind of traditional SEO and brand building stuff around getting cited more, getting more links and things like that, and building up your brand and your website over time.
Oh, two things I hadn't even thought about. So some great takeaways there. And just one more question on that, author attribution. Can you just dive into that a little bit more as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is part of the EEAT, which I think we'll come on to talk about in a bit more detail. And just as Google looks at these signals, I would say that LLMs look at these signals just as much, if not more, to assign credibility and authority to content in deciding which extracts to pull and serve back in their response to a particular prompt. So this really matters, having bylines, having author pages, having authors with credentials, with bios, with letters before their name in some instances as well. All of these things are little signals that LLMs can pick up on, as can Google. We've just launched a new editorial vehicle, a blog at Popsa, and we've gone heavy on the author attribution side of things to make sure that signaling is getting out there from the outset.
So if anyone wants some examples, go and check out Popsa's blog. So a lot of our attendees today are senior marketing leaders. How should they be thinking about their SEO strategy, and what are the key questions they should be asking, not just their SEO teams, but also their agencies, as they may or may not have SEO specialists within their teams? Claudia, how are you handling this with some of your clients, and what are you advising them?
I think the thing to keep in mind at the moment is this is a huge conversation, but at the moment it is still incredibly new, and particularly from a traffic point of view, it's still a very small proportion of what is being bundled into organic search traffic. So the first thing, having been an in-house SEO before, is having some consideration for the fact that it's like nobody knows the answers at the moment. I think any SEO teams who are monitoring this, reading the journals, looking at whether they can see how much traffic is being referred from large language models and build that into their numbers and their reporting, who are looking at ways of monitoring visibility in LLMs. If they're at that stage where they're asking those questions and investigating that across all of my clients and everybody that we work with, those are the ones who are right at the forefront at the moment. Nobody has this solved. We're all kind of learning as we go along. So kind of asking questions about that, recognizing that a traffic decline in SEO that's happening to absolutely everybody that I work with at the moment, that their visibility is not translating into clicks the same way that it used to. And thinking about how can you support your SEO team in adjusting KPIs to reflect the value of what they're doing, even if that is not traffic anymore. So being prepared to pivot a little bit on the way that you understand what success looks like for that SEO team at the moment, I think would probably be my first, like, if there was one thing that you can take away in terms of like how senior people, CMOs, etc., are working with their SEO team, it's that it's like this is very new. The traffic impact at the moment, certainly from traffic coming from LLMs, is small. The traffic impact from AI overviews, etc., being on results pages, and small numbers of people migrating away from the traditional Google experience. This is all very new, and there aren't yet any answers. But if your SEO team are actively learning and actively investigating how they can shift their focus to understand the new lay of the land, then they're in a pretty good place. What do you think?
We're going to come on to talk about measurement in a bit, but what sort of questions should we be asking agencies as well, both incumbents and when we're reviewing and looking at new agencies?
That's really good. I think kind of asking them what they're doing to help understand the broader market. I think the role of an agency quite often is to have a bit more of a broad view than an in-house team, and to be doing some of the kind of experiments and the research to kind of have a perspective on this stuff. So I'd be looking to kind of ask them some questions about, like, what are you seeing? What are you measuring? How are you kind of quantifying impact on things, and what kind of recommendations are you giving?
Anything to be wary of? Any answers that they might give that should be an immediate red flag?
I mean, the stereotype about SEO is answering every question with "it depends" is there for a reason. There's a lot of nuance here. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of grey areas. So I am somebody who is always wary of certainty. Anybody who is saying this is the answer, we can get you to do this, we can do whatever, when everything is shifting this much and there's always been so much uncertainty in search, if anyone comes in kind of very confident, very certain at the moment, then it makes me feel like they're not understanding the full scope, or that they're pretending that they're on top of things.
Right. So any agency that comes in and says, we've got this now, we know exactly what we're doing, you're like, this is a worry. Okay,
yeah, ask them what they still don't know the answer to. And if they don't have an answer for that, then they're not thinking hard enough.
I love that. Jamie, how are you thinking about it at Popsa?
Yeah, I'll come at it from the perspective in terms of what I'd be asking my SEO team in-house. I'd first of all be challenging around, are we showing up at all in any of the AI generated answers? Are we measuring that? How are we measuring that? What are we showing up for? And just trying to understand that in a bit more detail. And then, once we start to get a sense of that, then we can start asking the questions around how can we make our content more machine readable for AIs, with schema, structure, clarity, brevity, all the stuff that we know kind of works. It's obviously a bit of a balancing act to be struck, because anything that you do exclusively for AIs like ChatGPT, you don't want that to work against what you're doing for Google. But to be honest, those are kind of edge cases, and most things work for both. So it's about tweaking and learning, and seeing what changes, having a real testing and experimentation mindset, really like we did at the dawn of SEO back in the day, when we didn't really know how things worked, when Google weren't particularly transparent about things. They're a lot more transparent now, certainly more than they were, and we know a lot more because all of the testing and experimentation has been done over many, many years, whereas we don't have all of that with LLMs like ChatGPT anymore. I think probably the critical question, the final question to then be asking, which I know we're going to come on to, is around the measurement piece and the business impact. So especially where we're appearing, but there are no clicks. That's the most challenging piece in all of this, I think, the most challenging question.
Before we move on to that, such an important question, just one question from Neil. Are there free AI SEO testing tools to see how you appear in various LLMs? What's the best way to actually look at how well you are doing?
I mean, there are lots of kind of free trials that I've done of tools. I can dig out a few that I've had a look at. And of course SEO Clarity has some tooling as well. There's a lot of startups, it seems like hundreds of them. I get emails every day with a new tool reporting on AI visibility and offering a free trial, and then it kind of moves into a subscription model. I think what I'll say is there's no one tool that I've come across yet that has really nailed it. There's always kind of missing pieces. I think that will begin to mature, and we'll start to see more complete solutions in place. I think we're tentative about investing too heavily in that at the moment at PopSub, because the nature of our audience, the nature of our business, looking at our own data is, and to Claudia's previous point around actually how many of these searches and clicks and traffic is happening in ChatGPT versus in Google, I think is a lot smaller for us relative to other industries like in B2B or more informational content led industries like healthcare, for example. So we're monitoring it closely and testing, but in terms of investing in those sorts of tooling, that's probably a bit further down the road for us.
Claudia, did you offer anything like this at SEO Clarity?
So we've just launched a solution called RKI. It's not a free tool. The cost of collecting this data is extensive, but we're keeping it as affordable as we can. And yeah, I mean, I think it probably leads on to what we're probably about to talk about in a moment about like, what is it we should be measuring here. But essentially, it's like, are we talked about log files earlier? Are the crawlers from these LLMs able to access our site? Are they accessing it? Which pages are they accessing? When are they accessing them? How do we show up for the topics and questions that that are most valuable to us? And there's a lot of nuance on that we can talk about in a moment. What's the referral traffic from these large language models? And then things like sentiment, being able to measure the sentiment of the answers. I think even though these searches maybe aren't ending up giving you a lot of referral traffic, the same way that we have come to rely on over the years with Google, there's a danger of not investing and making sure that you're showing up here, and then it's your competitors who are showing up there, and they get to be the ones that are owning that space, owning the conversation about your vertical, and kind of owning that kind of positive sentiment. So we have something called RKI that we're doing some trials of at the moment, and you can get in touch with me and I'll pass you on to the right people if that's something that you're interested in.
So let's get stuck into measurement. Given that no doubt at the leadership table I was like, what's going on? SEO traffic has dropped. How are you going to manage those expectations, and what are the key metrics you can report on now?
Yeah, so I think it's always valuable anytime you're bringing in any kind of change to measurement to continue to bring that in alongside how you've always measured things. If you stop one thing and start another thing, you've got nothing to compare anything to. So I think continuing to report on, for example, your organic visibility, if you're tracking keywords and looking at your average rank and things like that, being able to show in terms of where we're ranking. And so this is kind of, with all of this, apart from the fact that we have these large language models coming in, we're also seeing these changes at Google that are affecting even the Google part of this conversation. So kind of showing that visibility that you have had, maybe it's increasing a little bit year on year if you're talking just about kind of the standard results, but being able to show that in the context of like, this is what our visibility used to be worth and this is what it's worth now. So that's an important one. I would then be bringing in referral traffic from large language models. I think that needs to be incorporated in, but it's not going to fill the hole because, like you say, a lot of these searches, because of the type of responses that they generate, are not going to be very valuable from a point of clicks. But it's important to have that included in there. That's kind of where I would start, I think, is kind of showing that this isn't just an excuse for why our traffic's down. It's not that we're ranking worse year over year. I think being able to prove that out first and make sure that you're counting everything that should be counting towards SEO. This does seem to have fallen into the SEO team's laps a little bit, the large language model part, and kind of making sure that you're getting credit for those visits that are coming from there. It's going to be important.
Jamie, how are you thinking about it at Pop? So what are you now sharing in terms of dashboards and metrics, and also handling some of those questions that are coming in?
Yeah, well, we have to keep on tracking the same KPIs that we have been tracking. There's just some additional things that we need to now layer into this. So of course, traffic and conversions, that will always be something that we need to track. But obviously, we've seen a decline in click-through rate from the search engine results, and we'll need to continue to track that to understand the trend. Especially with AI mode coming along, which I know we'll come on to talk about. There it has been suggested that AI is going to trigger or is starting to trigger a change in search behavior where the number of searches is going to increase. So as much as the click-through rate is going down, it's suggested that the number of impressions is going to go up because there's going to be more searches happening as a result of the nature of chat. So this is also something to keep an eye on. The unfortunate thing and the holy grail of data that's missing at the moment is impression data from LLMs. So how often is your brand or content surfaced in those answers when no click happens, which is going to be the vast majority of the time, I should imagine, but we've got no data to really prove that yet. I think this will start to be my guess is that this will start to be made available once the likes of ChatGPT, AI mode introduce advertising. This could possibly come from AI mode first before ChatGPT. But once we have that, then we can start modeling some attribution together. It won't be perfect, but it's certainly more than we can do today, which at the moment is really just correlating things to understand. So, for example, you can have a look at your AI visibility using tools like SEO Clarity and others, and then, well, how's that impacting our number of brand searches? Because this is a common behavior, where you go on to AI search, you come across a brand, and then oftentimes I'll then just go and search for that brand on Google because I want to more easily go to their website or see images or video or things that ChatGPT today can't really serve as well. So there's an expectation that the more visible you are in, say, ChatGPT, the more of a brand search uplift you're going to see, the more traffic you're potentially going to see, maybe even the more your conversion rate is going to improve over time. So correlating your growth in AI visibility with all of the other kind of more traditional SEO metrics that you track. Again, it's not a direct way of attributing, but can help to build cases for investment with some of the directional data that you get from that.
It's a really good point. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say one more thing as well that's worth mentioning is staying on top of the macro trends, the external data outside of what you're reporting on internally. This is something we're having to do so that we know when to be ready to kind of pivot and put more of our time and investment into LLM optimization. So looking at the market share between LLMs, the market share of LLMs versus traditional search engines, looking at the feature rollouts that are coming up. So for example, the shopping product that's going to be launched in the UK soon, at least for ChatGPT. You can sign up for that now to get information on when they're going to be ready to start accepting product feeds. So keeping on top, reporting on that piece as well, which is not something that we really need to do today in the traditional SEO reporting sphere.
Oh, that's so interesting. Jamie, you just pointed out something I hadn't even thought of, is like the change in the user journey. So I do exactly what you just said. I go and do research in ChatGPT, and then I go and look for whatever I've discovered in Google.
That's very common. I think, sorry, so one more thing just to add then on this as well that I've been thinking about, and we've started to kind of segment at Popsa, because the majority of search intent in ChatGPT is informational, which is around 70-80% of all searches anyway in terms of the number of queries. And the majority of searches now in Google, or how this is eventually going to go, is going to be navigational or transactional / commercial. So segmenting your content in this way can really help going forward in terms of reporting across these different platforms. So I definitely suggest doing that in your reporting.
That's really interesting. So ChatGPT for informational and then Google for navigation and transaction, which Romain helps with a little bit with your question, which we'll come on to in more detail later. Claudia.
I think the big takeaway is that SEO reporting is going to have to become more complex, because the kind of landscape is becoming more fractured. I think as SEOs, we've kind of taken for granted that Google shares data with us, Bing shares data with us. It'll tell us which keywords people saw our results for, what URL they saw, how many times they saw it, whether they clicked it. We've got all of that data. It's been provided throughout from webmaster tools and then through the Search Console era. And at the moment, we don't get that from LLMs. But even not thinking about LLMs at the moment and thinking, I saw there was a question about like the more traditional Google experience. And so in a pre-AI mode world of Google right now, even that is having to become more complex. As Jamie said, like monitoring CTR is going to be something that we need to be able to account for, like CTR per rank position, so that we can show being position 1 used to be worth this amount of click-through rate, and now it's only worth this amount of click-through rate. But also the results pages, we're not in a 10 blue links landscape anymore, where you Google something and you just get a list of web pages that you could go to. There are more and more result types, AI overviews, product feeds, images, news carousels, local results. And actually, I think looking at how much of that opportunity is available to you, which of those results could you potentially be in, how many of those results are you in, and they might be less valuable in terms of clicks because they give the person all the information they need on the results page, but it is space that you can have visibility in, that you can push your competitors out of potentially. So actually building in measuring where you're showing up outside of the standard results, and how you can optimize those. Are your images optimized well enough that they can appear in image results? Have you set up your merchant feed to make sure that you can appear in product modules if you are a retail site? I think really kind of thinking about the big picture of search is going to be a kind of shift in reporting, and from kind of a senior CMO kind of perspective, and from like, if I was an SEO in-house at the moment, there's a big re-education piece that, like, even as we're still learning what's coming and how it's going to impact everything, you've got to be able to bring people in the business along on that journey, because things are getting complex very quickly. Things are getting fractured very quickly. Things are getting harder to measure very quickly because we're not being provided with data from LLMs that we're getting from Google. Google isn't telling us what feature the clicks and impressions came from. AI mode data, AI overview data is all in there in Search Console, but it's just lumped in with all of the other impressions and clicks. So as that gets more complex, we need to be able to tell compelling stories and simplify a very complex landscape and educate the people around us so that they're able to interpret the reporting that we're going to have to diversify a little bit. It can't be as straightforward as this is our non-brand visibility and these are our non-brand clicks anymore.
Right. So a lot of internal education. And are there any new kids on the block in terms of tech platforms? You know, we've always talked about Ahrefs and SEMrush as the go-to tools for measurement. Are they keeping up with this? Should we start to explore new tools, or is it actually just hold fire and wait? It's all a bit up in the air at the moment. Jamie.
Yeah, I think it's always worth exploring new tools. That has been the case also in the era of traditional SEO. I think you're always going to have your all-encompassing platforms that do lots of different things, and then you're going to have solutions that kind of focus on specific things. It's why, you know, people might use SEO Clarity, but then they're always going to use Screaming Frog on the side because it does one particular thing, you know, very well. So I think the same is going to emerge within the realm of AI. I think one key difference that wouldn't have existed in the traditional SEO era is the fact that you can use ChatGPT and LLMs themselves as an SEO tool for many different tasks that these SaaS solutions were always providing. Popsa, we've built a number of custom GPTs to do things that we may have done in the past with different tools. It's not always perfect, and there's some learning and refinement, but this is becoming ever more powerful with the actions feature within custom GPTs, where you can connect via API connectors to data sources and things like that. We've got custom GPTs at Popsa to suggest URL slugs, to generate headlines and meta descriptions, to estimate read times for blog articles, and even more advanced use cases like creating long form content, which we're using Claude for actually. So there's a lot that LLMs can now do to act as an SEO tool. It won't be able to do everything that an SEO tool can do, but if you've already got enterprise licenses within your business to some of these LLMs, and you've got access to the likes of Zapier and Nathan to kind of connect those into more agentic systems, then this is definitely worth exploring. I think that is the future, and it's worth investing in those technical skills. There is some technical skill involved, and building those skills within the team. At Popsa, we've established an AI council. We convene regularly to kind of discuss this, and we make sure that we've allocated a certain degree of time amongst ourselves and a small amount of budget as well to kind of test and experiment with these tools, run pilots to see what works, what doesn't, and then report these things back to the business.
Right, so a lot of exploring. Claudia, you mentioned Google's AI mode, which is live in the US and launching over here at some point soon. Being completely naive, what is this and what should we be doing to prepare for it?
Yeah, so this is kind of the introduction of LLM interface into the Google results page. And at the moment, when we look at what the share is across the large language models, OpenAI, ChatGPT is far and away the biggest player in that field. I think AI mode coming in and being part, it's already happened in the States. It's already starting to roll out there. Essentially, you go to Google, you put in your query, and it can convert to an AI generative experience right there within Google. I think the introduction of AI mode may be the thing that turns the tables a little bit on OpenAI, kind of in a similar way. If you're as old as I am, you might remember the kind of HD DVD versus Blu-ray, like which one was going to take off. And really the big, it looked like HD DVD was going to be the one at the time. I worked in HMV at the time, so I remember this vividly. But the big factor that that made Blu-ray be the one that came out on top was that Sony built Blu-ray player into their PlayStation 3. So it was what people already had, and that was why Blu-ray became the dominant one. And so while people are currently looking for like an AI gen experience at the moment are going to OpenAI because that is the one that kind of took off first, and has almost kind of become a shorthand for LLMs. The fact that Google is going to be putting their AI experience right where people are already going, to their Chrome browsers, to their Google search engine, and putting their AI experience into that, I wouldn't be surprised if that takes over a lot of the usership of OpenAI and ChatGPT, but also brings people into it that hadn't started to adopt LLMs yet, that they're still standard traditional search engine users. This is going to get them interacting in a large language model way. There's one thing actually that has just twigged in my brain that that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is the change in behavior of users. I don't know if this is the ideal place to bring it up, but for decades now, users have taken complex questions that they've got in their head and distilled them down to terms that they can put in a search engine that will return a single web page that will have answers for them. So you can go from going, right, well, I'm trying to get into running. I want to do couch to 5K. I need to find some shoes that are going to work for me or whatever. And you put into Google best running shoes 5K, something like that, something that's a very simplified version of your actual problem. People who are going to ChatGPT to ask a similar question are putting in, I am a woman in my 30s doing couch to 5K. I've got wide feet with high arches, and I'm going to be running on roads. What are the best shoes for me? So that training that people have had to kind of think in terms of keywords. The thing with AI engines and AI mode coming in, to bring it back to your question, is that not only are the questions generated, the responses generated fresh each time and could have different sources, could have different content in them, but also we're going to be moving away from a landscape where we have kind of search volume attributed to keywords, because people aren't typing the same thing into an LLM as other people are typing into the LLM, even if they're searching for the same topic. So the way that we're having to think about this is kind of moving away from a keyword model more into like a topic. We're having to go higher and lower in terms of granularity, because the lower we go, the more specific those questions are. But we need to kind of roll it up to overall topics and look at kind of trends and the bigger picture there. So that's another kind of big shift in not just the experience on search engines and LLMs, but also it's going to change user behavior. But there are things we can look at, like if people are searching differently on LLMs and Google isn't breaking out that data into different features or different channels that it's coming through, maybe we can start looking at the length of the queries that are being put in and start to kind of discern which ones seem to be things that somebody has put in. Maybe we're looking for one, like, single impression queries that have over 15 words, for example, and looking at those and trying to figure it out that way. So I think that's going to be something else.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come on to this and content creation. But just in terms of crystal ball, Jamie, when do you think Google AI mode is going to launch? And is there anything we should be doing now to prep for it or to like learn from the US?
Well, I think they're pushing for it as hard and fast as possible to get it rolled out. I think obviously Google is a much versus ChatGPT is a much bigger ship to steer in this regard, and they've got such an enormous user base. They have to kind of tread somewhat cautiously, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this year it's live in the UK, maybe late in Q3, even at a push. I think the big question is how soon it becomes the default experience, and that's going to depend a lot on user adoption, but I expect Google are going to push this pretty hard, start monetizing with ads fairly soon after launch. They've already talked about this. They've indicated that they're going to do it. I think quite possibly they'll do it before ChatGPT does it, although because they've got the infrastructure already in place to do that. Although I think ChatGPT will start running ads themselves next year as well. I think in terms of preparation, one of the first things I would be doing, and we started to do at Popsa, is play around with AI mode. You can use geo-proxy tools, and one thing that I learned as well, you have to use a personal account because AI mode won't work if you're using a Google Workspace account. But as long as you're using a personal account and you set up your geo proxy for the US, you can have a play around in AI mode, get a feel for the differences, the UX, the quirks versus ChatGPT and the others. I think that's the first course of action, but I wouldn't be jumping headfirst into any kind of full-blown LLM optimization strategies for AI mode specifically just yet. But I would expect a further drop in CTR that we've been discussing previously when AI mode rolls out. This is, of course, going to take away more of the clicks in the same way that you don't get as many clicks from ChatGPT, because it's delivering a similar sort of experience where there's the answer and there's going to be some citations, but they're not going to be as clear and sending traffic to the open web in the same way that Google search still does today to some degree below the AI overviews. And that's when the real shift needs to happen in terms of what we were talking about before: measurement, attribution, KPIs, and SEO is just going to be playing more of an upper funnel role at that point, and needs to be treated as such.
So when we talk about it playing more of an upper funnel role, does this mean we should start thinking about content in a different way? We've always had this EAT model. Is that still relevant in this AI landscape?
I think we still think about content in the same way, and always think about writing content for users first and foremost, and then obviously think about how we layer in the optimizations for SEO and for LLMs and so on. But one of the things that we're thinking about strategically at Popsa as we're doing our blog perspectives is how we can make this content work as hard as possible across as many channels as possible, and thinking about, this is why we don't like to call it a blog, we call it more of an editorial vehicle, because a blog is very much tied to web, and actually we want this content to live on our app, in social, distributed via CRM, and other things like that, and use it as a brand building vehicle as much as an SEO play. The SEO is just one part of it. So I think the days of launching blogs purely for SEO purposes are done. The one thing I always like to remind the business as well when I get kind of challenged is around, this isn't really delivering enough traffic from SEO, is but this content is also supporting all of our lower funnel content in ranking more prominently, and we started to see signs of that already, because of the way the sites link together and the authority that's passed around. So this is something to remember, is that it all kind of works as one big ecosystem. You create this upper funnel content, it will also support your content down at the bottom of the funnel as well, and your key product pages and your money pages.
And Claudia, how should we be balancing this? Like, everyone's using AI to generate content, but obviously you need that human point of view as well. Like, what's the balance there? And how strict is Google being about, oh, this must be AI generated?
Google has not said that it's kind of penalizing AI in any way. I think one of the things that's interesting about like the EEAT, for anyone who doesn't know the acronym, it's experience, expertise, authority, and trust. So qualities that Google had said were important, is that they came out and said it's not really a ranking factor. But I think it did change the way that we thought about the content we were creating in SEO, that you go back a few years and its content is king, but it was like about volume of content. The longer the content you can create, the better it's going to rank. And then it became, EEAT became kind of shorthand for like the better and more helpful the content you create, the higher it will rank. And while that ended up not being a ranking factor, I think framing it that way in terms of what we were creating meant that we were focusing on the user as we were writing this, and we were trying to make sure that the content that we created came from an authoritative place, was really informative, was really helpful. And when it comes to being pulled into answers from LLMs, etc., that is still going to be something that's really valuable. And I think still focusing on the user and what users want. So researching, for example, what are the people also ask questions that show up around this topic, and can we understand what people are interested in, and make sure that our content is asking even the most specific questions that people are asking. In terms of like actually creating content with AI, at Clarity we have a solution called Content Fusion that builds that in, where you can kind of upload content from your site and train Content Fusion on your tone of voice. It takes into account like what are the keywords that need to be included in titles, meta descriptions, in the content, etc., based on what we're seeing rewarded with high positions in Google. So there's a lot of that coming in. I am still, I don't know how rare it is in the SEO industry, like with so much AI being a focus of everything. I still think the human element is incredibly important, not even just from a hallucinations point of view, but right at the beginning, I talked about like the tech side versus the empathetic side. If I'm reading a piece of content and something just twigs in my mind, I'm like, I think this is written by AI, it immediately makes me feel less connected to that content. So one of the things that I really like to do with our tool is, instead of necessarily using the AI to generate big, long pieces, which it absolutely can do, is I choose the outline option. Use AI to analyze all of the pages that rank really well for this content, look at what they have in common, and generate an outline of a piece of content for me that I can use as a framework. It kind of stops you from starting at, like, if you're running a race, you get to start a few steps ahead in the race. You don't have to have that blank sheet of paper part. And then to kind of, maybe you've got some points where you think, right, I want to expand this, or I want to ask the kind of built-in chatbot, what are the topics that my competitors aren't covering, and actually using the AI to just support the research part. I still think humans should be writing a lot of what ends up on websites, not just, and from kind of a reliability, that you need that governance, you need that control over what the information is. You want to make sure it's correct. You don't want to be caught. Was it The Telegraph, I think, earlier this year, that did a list of like the top 10 summer reads for the summer? You could read that whole article and be like, okay, cool, some of those books sound great. None of them existed. So you don't want to be caught with your trousers down that way of kind of relying on AI to generate content, and it just makes stuff up for you that then ends up being a news story. You know, there's a reputation management part there as well. But also I just think human written content is more engaging and doesn't twig that kind of uncanny valley thing in people's heads. I think I went off on about 3 tangents then, but yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. Like, how can you use AI to help speed up the research and the planning, and ensure that what you produce at the end is checked and has the voice of a human being?
QA is key here, I think, and also making sure it's in your tone of voice. So 2 questions before we go to some questions that have been shared in chat as well. How does this affect how you're hiring for SEO people? Does it mean that you're actually looking for a different skill set or a different type of personality? Jamie, what are you thinking about when building out your SEO team?
Yeah, I mean, we're not actively building out the team any further at this point in time, but you know, if it comes to a point where I do, then I would be looking at changes to both the size of the team and the type of SEO hires that I'd be thinking about. So in terms of size, I think the first thing to remember is that AI obviously enables a huge time saving across the operational layers of SEO. We've talked about some of these already in custom GPTs and things like that. And there's lots more that, you know, we can be doing. And I think at Popsa, that's where we're wanting to invest. We did a kind of corporate PR piece recently talking about the fact that we now deliver over 1 million in revenue per employee. You know, we're kind of a scale up, and yeah, and we're like 50 people or so at this point in time, and we've been able to achieve that because we have always been very much focused on AI and automation, and this comes from the CEO top down. It's kind of how the business was founded and very much kind of core to our beliefs. So the reality is that fewer people are needed to deliver the same output, and I don't think that's true of just SEO. That's going to be the same in other disciplines as well. I think in terms of the type of hire, I think the real shift is actually in soft skills. There are some hard skills as well that I'd be looking at, but I think the 3 that I would call out are curiosity, critical thinking, and quality control. I think I'd probably pick critical thinking if I had to choose one of those 3, because there is a big risk of over-reliance on LLMs. You know, I've seen this with some people in the past, and I think if you don't have a really solid grounding of the SEO fundamentals, you won't know where AI is getting it wrong, and it does often get it wrong. And it states that it gets it wrong, it hallucinates, and you know, this is where you know, you can end up wasting more time than it saves you. And I think on the hard skills side, I'd be looking for people with a broader understanding of marketing and how things connect together. Because the kind of specific technical knowledge is now so easily accessible via ChatGPT these days. I think it's more about knowing how to do things like prompt design, workflow automation, how to kind of connect things together and manage AI resources and allocate resources and time towards projects that AI can support with in the right way. I actually think the product management mindset is a really transferable skill here. System thinkers that can drive outcomes efficiently, I think, will be very well placed for the skill set that's going to serve the future of SEO.
I think curiosity is going to be so important.
Yeah.
And still thinking. Claudia, just to wrap up, what's one piece of advice you would give to marketing leaders to future-proof their SEO strategy?
That's such a good question. I was actually just going to add one thing really quickly to Jamie's point. I think the soft skills are definitely where I would be looking for hiring at the moment as well. And one of the big ones for me would be resilience in the face of change. That, like, anybody whose confidence and their ability to do their job is based on knowing exactly what they're going to be doing each day and that the rug isn't going to be pulled out from under them. You've got to be able to pivot immediately and to move fast in that. And I also think now more than ever, like having diversity in your SEO teams is incredibly important. A lot of the most of the best SEOs I've ever worked with, and neurodivergent, ADHD, and autism seem to be really helpful for kind of having that ability to change quickly and to think outside the box and to kind of balance ordered thinking with and structure with being able to change really quickly. Maybe as a neurodivergent person myself, I'm biased on that, but I definitely know that like the qualities of my ADHD that are frustrating in other parts of my life actually make me a good SEO. In terms of like what a team can do to future-proof the SEO strategy and what was
tip.
Sorry, was that?
What's your number one tip?
Number one tip would be to allow, so for marketing leaders, to make sure that your SEO team have the space to change things when they need to. I think any kind of senior marketing leaders who are requiring the SEO team to continue doing things and continue reporting and continue measuring in ways that they have before is going to really struggle to see the value in SEO going forward.
Great tip. Thank you. Space to explore as well. Jamie, what about you?
Yeah, it's so hard to kind of distill it down just to one tip. But I would say, make sure that more now than ever that teams have a bit of capacity to experiment. I think certainly I found this especially in a startup environment, it's just like what's happening right in front of you now, and working on what's working today, and there's very little capacity to kind of then think to the future. And I think it is important to carve out that time, make sure there's a bit of time carved out for the teams, a bit of budget maybe as well where needed, to experiment, to test, to learn, to try and fail in some instances, to try and get things right, because this is the future. It is coming, and we need to be taking actions now to be ready. And so whilst we do need to focus on what works today, of course, there also needs to be that bit of time to for what's coming, because there are going to be some significant changes coming with all of this.
Yeah, so important. So lots of space for experimentation and be prepared. And on that note, I think we've got time for one question. I think Jesse's one really ties into this. I think what's really key is that the business appreciates that there is no right answer at the moment. It's all about learning as we go and being flexible and adaptable. And Jesse said, is there a danger of SEO and AI budget being divested because the business isn't seeing those immediate results? And how do you best handle that? How are you dealing with that, Jamie, at Popsa?
There is a very real danger of that, for sure. And I think how we're dealing with that at Popsa, one of the things is trying to think more multi-channel, as I mentioned before. And what I've done with some of my budget is I've kind of distributed it a little bit differently, so that it's more justified in the sense that I want content created, because that is going to be what's going to drive my SEO, and so I've given more of my budget to the creative team to support the development of that content, which doesn't just serve SEO, it serves other channels and it serves the brand as well. But SEO has more of a voice at the table because it's invested specifically in that area. So there are some things you can do along those lines, but yeah, it is a very real risk, and I think it's going to be difficult to defend against until we get that those additional data points like the impression data, and we can start to kind of provide a more holistic picture as to what's going on. Until then, just have to be a little bit more creative about it. But I think I would also say that SEO is not the only channel that is struggling, and maybe for different reasons. Paid media is becoming more expensive, cut through and organic social is becoming more difficult. So there are challenges in other channels as well, so everything needs to be looked on balance.
Super helpful advice. Claudia, anything you want to add to wrap up?
I think that I agree with that, to be honest. It's yeah, nothing to add from me. I think Jamie nailed that one. You'll be pleased to hear, given the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I've got so many notes, and we will be following up with recording and also some links that Jamie and Claudia have kindly shared that will be useful, and some people to follow on LinkedIn as well. Jamie and Claudia are also very happy for you to reach out to them directly on LinkedIn if you have any further questions. So helpful. Some lovely feedback already in the chat. Really appreciate it. And we may be bringing you back on for part 2, maybe later on this year, and see how we're going with it all. And it was AI mode. So yes, I will be harassing you later on, probably in about October, for the next stage of the future of SEO. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.